U.S. history. Today we're going to do a quick lecture about what's going on at the home front here in the United States in regards to propaganda. Now, propaganda, if we remember, is a system used to help create a basically like a common cause for people to join behind. So, wartime propaganda is fairly common, not just in the United States, but in many other countries. Because what wartime propaganda does is it helps to unite everybody under the common cause of fighting the war for the side in which the government has decided to fight for, or the people have decided to fight for, depending on what kind of government is instituted in a particular country. So let's talk about the war at home and how people were propagandized in World War I. So there were a lot of propaganda campaigns here in the United States, but remember, both sides used war propaganda to motivate people to support their side of the war. So whether it was the Germans using propaganda, or the British, or the United States. Here we see a poster that was created here in the United States, and it says, "Daddy, what did you do during the Great War?" Remembering that the Great War was what we called World War I back then, because they didn't know that there was going to be a second World War, so they didn't call it World War I. So the little girl is asking her dad, what did he do during the Great War, kind of making him feel like, well, if I don't do something, I'm not a hero in my daughter's eyes. So that's kind of propaganda, making him think about, how am I supporting this nation? Okay, so propaganda took on 4 forms. The purpose of propaganda during war was either A, like we see here in this poster, to enlist men to join the war cause and have them enlist in the army or one of the military forces in order to help fight against the enemy. Propaganda could also be used to dehumanize the enemy, make them look less than human, so that it was a lot easier to fight the enemy and kill the enemy than if you make them look human. So there was dehumanizing propaganda. And then propaganda could also be used to finance the war, meaning we need money in order to fight a war. It takes a lot of money to fight a war. A lot of our national debt comes from fighting wars. And so we need money. So propaganda helps to have people maybe participate in ways like donations of money, or also to buy what we call war bonds and things like that to help finance the war. And then lastly, propaganda can be used to conserve resources, meaning to save resources, to not use as much resources so that the soldiers can use them overseas. An example of this would be gas. To have people here in the United States not use as much gas, not travel as much, so that gas that we own can be used to help fuel tanks and fuel automobiles and stuff like that are being used in the war over in Europe. So now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to watch a couple videos. This first video is a gentleman talking about how propaganda was used in Germany and in Great Britain, and a little bit about talking about how it was used in the United States. This is an 8-minute video. It's a very good informational video about how propaganda can be both positive and negative to a society, which goes along with our discussion that you're having today as your asynchronous work. The last video that I'm including is a 3-minute video of some of the war propaganda posters. Keeping in mind, this is World War I, so we're in the early 1900s, and there's no television, there's no commercials and things like that to promote the propaganda. So instead, we used a lot of print media in magazines, newspapers, and posters. So you'll see a few of these types of propaganda that were used, some of which go with along with our categories that we talk about to enlist men, to enlist women to do things for the war effort. They weren't allowed to fight in the war, but they could do other things like nursing and occupations like that, to dehumanize the enemy, to finance the war, and lastly, to ration supplies. So you'll see posters exemplifying each of these types of propaganda. Lastly, you'll hear a song that was written for World War I, kind of one of those songs that might get in your head, but you can hear the propaganda of the song in itself, kind of encouraging soldiers to fight in this war. All right, guys, hopefully that's helpful, and hopefully you've learned a little bit something about propaganda for this lesson. Thanks, guys, and we'll be seeing you soon.